Welcome to the Don't Go There podcast. I'm Dr. Brenda Gazelle, and I'm joined by my co-hosts Samantha Seaton, Amanda Krotzer, and Jennifer Sasaki. We are four psychotherapists going toward mental health issues that aren't often discussed. And our podcast may go to psychological places that are both scary and exciting. We hope to inspire authenticity and vulnerability. We want to go there, and we're so happy you've decided to go there with us. This episode is titled, Does Having Children or Being Child-Free Make You Happier? This topic has been huge for a while now. It gained a good deal of popularity in 2013 when Times Magazine not only wrote an article, but on their cover, there's this couple laying in the sun on some sandy beach, and the caption on the title reads, The Childfree Life. And the article itself cites numerous studies about couples reporting being happier without children. Since 2009, the New York Times and other reputable publications have published several articles about academic studies using data from Europe and America that report significantly lower levels of happiness in life satisfaction, marital satisfaction, and mental well-being for parents versus non-parents. And all of this led to the question, why do people have children? And I've had colleagues and relatives, though, feel shocked that I would even ask that question because I don't have children. And they've actually said to me, I did not know that was an option. So that's so interesting. You're thinking about it. Or what? That's just what you do. You just have children. And so that I even was thinking about that, I think in my 20s and 30s was revelatory for many friends, colleagues, and relatives. So I wonder, is that something that, is new for, even, I know two of us, Samantha and Jennifer, you both have children, but Amanda and I, we don't. And so I think it is a really provocative and evocative topic to go there, or that we're going to, but I'd love to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I don't have kids, as you mentioned, and growing up the way I did, it was expected. Like, you grow up, you get married, you have kids, all very young. And I have already stepped out of that box quite a bit by just coming up on 30 and not being married. And I feel like the older I've gotten, the more I've realized how much I love my free time, my own time to myself, not having to care for, and this sounds so selfish, and I hear this all the time, how selfish this sounds, not to have to care for anybody else, but my time is my own. And I grew up parenting my own parents, and so this sense of freedom almost feels like a second childhood for me, or the one I didn't get to begin with. But there's a lot of shame in it. I remember mentioning to my mom about a year ago that I probably wasn't going to have kids. And she's like, oh, well, you're not to that age yet where you can't do that. And it's like, oh, no, Mom, it has nothing to do with age. It has to do with a personal choice. I don't know that I'm equipped to think outside of myself that much in terms of children and what they require. And I just remember hearing her on the phone, was just appalled that would ever cross my mind. Like, how dare you not do what you're called to do as a woman, which is to reproduce. And that's kind of how my parents see it. So.
Right. And I think that goes back in tradition and religion, and just is kind of one of the expectations of just what we do. We meet someone, we get married, we have babies.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's really interesting. I do have children, and I had children young, and I grew up thinking I never wanted to have children. I think that was my solution to a painful childhood. I'll never get married, and I'll never have children, and I'll live in a loft and have my own dance company, and it'll just be this little controlled, perfect world. This is a pretty awesome idea for a kid, but I fell in love, and I got married, and I had a change of heart, and I have so many conflicting and competing emotions around this subject. If I'm really honest, I love my children. They are the most magical humans, and they grow me. But there are days like today when I'm battling to get them to go to church with me, and then they're whining and complaining and demanding from me, that I could see how a child-free life would just be a completely different world. Would be a world that I could spend more time healing and nurturing the parts of me that didn't get the nurturing they needed. But instead, my choice to have children has left those unnurtured parts of me under the pressure and demand to grow in order to be nurturing, which is a lot of stress. I don't know if that translates, but there really is that there. And then I've got to really check when I become resentful of taking care of my children, because there's like an unparented child inside of me that doesn't know how to parent, but yet is called in the moment to do a decent job. And I know enough to sit with clients all week and see the scars of damaging or hurtful parenting. So I hold myself to a very high standard, which means the pressure I put myself under is really difficult. And I'm not saying there's not meaning in it. There's meaning in it for me, and there's purpose, and there's beautiful repair I get to have with my children. I had an amazing moment with them yesterday that, if we have time, I'll get to. So there's these incredible moments that it all kind of comes together. But the stress of it is a real life consideration that I don't think I knew when I took the step. And I think if I'd known it, I may not have taken the step. I really see both sides of this, and I hope my children don't listen to this and need therapy. They'll probably need therapy for other reasons. But yeah, those are a lot of conflicting feelings about this one.
Wow, yeah, because you're so generous as you're doing that. I mean, so many people. That's what I was going to mention. There's been so many books, like best-selling books about child-free and loving it. 40 Good Reasons Not to Have Kids. Selfish, Shallow, and Self-Absorbed. 16 Writers on the Decision Not to Have Kids. I Can Barely Take Care of Myself. Like, those are the popular topics. And that has led to such an incredible backlash of, people who are saying quite rightly that having a child is a miracle. Like, that's an amazing thing. Like, giving birth, like, just this miracle of, like, you can create something with somebody else, like, that we would not acknowledge how incredible that is, and that it's kind of the one thing we can do other than, being born, living, and dying ourselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I would agree with that. I have 4 kids, and it has felt like a gift to me. And listening to all of you, I can see, I feel the same thing, sort of conflicting. The first thought I have is I want to jump in and be like, okay, well, what are the studies? What are they measuring and all this stuff? Because I can't.
And what day did they test these people?
Yeah.
What was their home life like?
Yeah, exactly. And totally. What are they actually looking at? But because for me, go ahead.
Wait, but those are excellent questions, because actually the first articles that came out did just kind of give this sense of Americans being the ones that were child-free happier. And then they looked and said, but Europeans were actually saying that they didn't agree with some of the Americans. And so they started looking back and forth and wondering if it had to do with childcare, if it had to do with enough community. And a lot of research has shown that there's a lack of community and a lack of childcare and a lack of support in America. And that's one of the reasons why Americans are less happy with children. So,
and I think
there is a lot to think about. I think those are excellent points.
Measuring like finances, for me, it's like if my husband and I were child free, we would have much more, disposable income than we do. So if you're going to measure our happiness off of income, how much money we have, but if you're going to measure it off of the relationship that we have and the relationships that I get to have on a daily basis are remarkable. Just being able to interact with my kids. And like you were saying, Sam, just like having these moments of repair that are so touching. I had my 17-year-old who just turned 17. I had him just recently, sitting next to me and crying over some stress and some things he was going through, saying how happy he is that he has me to talk to. And just that tender moment, it was it filled me up so much. And I mean, and watching them grow from the moment I've had them, it's like getting a gift every single day, just watching them and who they're going to become. It's like opening a present, each day. And I know that probably sounds so corny, but it really has felt that way to me, of just saying, who are they, who are they becoming? Who are they going to be? And it's exciting to go on that journey with them.
No, that doesn't sound corny. It sounds so stunning. And I think that that's part of why I chose not to have children, genuinely is, I grew up with a step parent who actively hated me. And I did not feel that she felt every day was exciting to see me grow. And I had other, my own biological parents who were struggling. So with all of that, it was very difficult to enjoy childhood. So I do think that then having kids yourself, that part of the experience affects it. I wonder that, people say, oh, it's so great to be. And so this is my own personal experience, but, oh, it's so nice just to be child free and, it's easier because of this and that. Is it really about all the things we get, or is it, the terror of it, not working out, the terror that you might hurt your children, or that they may not like you, or you may not like them, or it could be so bad. The stuff that you went through that you want to avoid. I think there's so much more of that that's not talked about, because it's so scary to talk about, that instead we say, oh, I'm just laying on a beach and I have no worries and I don't have kids and I'm happier. So look at you idiots. And there's that. But I also think, my belief most definitely is that, and I think, many psychologists have, said this as well, is that happiness shouldn't be the goal. The pursuit of happiness. If that's our goal, well, then we're lost. Because happiness is only one season in life. So when we say what makes you happier, having children or not, well, sure, either way, but that can't be what we're going towards. What we need to go towards is meaning. So what is most meaningful for you? That needs to be the question. If that's the question, does parenting give you more meaning or not? That's a fun debate. And then we realize how personal it is, just like happiness. Some people, you're going to have more meaning not having kids and putting your maternal and paternal resources somewhere else. And some are going to say, no, the only way that I get this out is to meet that deep paternal, maternal, call. I have to. But I think it's so interesting because we'll never know, because we'll never be on the other side. I can never know what it's like to have children, and you can never know what it's like to live a life with not children if you didn't do it.
Yeah. And for me, I feel like this is such a complicated, sticky subject, because it's so hard to untangle our own childhood from the idea of having children.
Right.
I feel like instantly they're like interwoven. They're supposed to be. That's how we're made as humans. But I love what you said about meaning. I think there is some sort of social meaning that we're called towards, to kind of feel like our lives matter, that we're weaving a sense of like a sense of mattering to other humans, inspiring other humans, being a part of the continuing story of humanity. And I think that can be done without birthing those humans. I think you can weave your life into, look at like Mother Teresa, look at people who choose celibacy and a spiritual life. They make profound influence in the world, that is beyond the birthing of a child. I can only speak for myself, because otherwise I feel like I'm pretending to be smarter than I am. But I feel like for me, I don't know if I could ever differentiate and be clear out of the woods of my own childhood to have really made a purely differentiated choice about whether or not I wanted to be a mother. Part of me wanted to heal my childhood stuff, totally. And then part of me wanted to see what it would be like, totally. And then I had them, and I found that there were days that I would say, man, I wish I never had my kids, because this is such a huge commitment, and the commitment terrifies me, and I don't know what I'm doing. And then I would remember my own childhood that my father would say out loud to us, I wish I'd never had kids. And I was like, oh my gosh, I now get my father. And I now get that my father reached a threshold of pain that he didn't know how to push through. So erasing the children was the way that he solved the pain. And then I was able to be like, oh God, I'm just in pain. And I can move through this pain, and I can grieve my humanity, And then I can let my children know what's age appropriate about my limitations. And I can have this repair that's huge, which is so cool. But then at the same time, I get to the end of the day and I lay my head on my pillow and I'm like, oh, good Lord. Like, what have I taken on? Like, there's so much in it that I think sometimes we don't know until we're in it. Like, wow, this is the real reason I did it. And I don't know. Yeah.
It's interesting because I never had a conscious choice of I'm going to have kids or not have kids. I got married and I got pregnant 6 months later, not really thinking about it. And when I found out I was pregnant, I cried because I was terrified and had never been around kids. And so I hadn't really thought about it that much. And thankfully I didn't, because I don't know, with my trauma in my childhood too, I don't know that I would have made that choice. But I think, and Sam, what you're saying, I mean, I totally agree with it. It definitely has pushed me in a way that I can't imagine anything else pushing me towards my own healing.
Yeah.
And understanding always the messages that were sent to me as a kid and what I'm sending to my kids. And so I've had to become very aware of, what I hear going on inside of me and what I'm saying to them and how they might be hearing that. And all of that, again, has just pushed me. I mean, so much more than if I was just in relationship with people. I mean, that's just been for me. That's what it's taken for me to get through some of my own healing. And it is so far from perfect. My husband and I have always said, we do not have a college fund for our kids. We have a therapy fund because that stuff does get passed down.
I don't even think I have that. So
yeah.
You're ahead of the game.
I mean, it just does get passed down. But the beauty of it is the grace and the ability to repair. I know I do things regularly that are so wrong, even though I understand the theory behind it. I know what I need to do, the messages that I sent, and I still, because I am broken, screw up royally. And I have to come back and say, I'm so sorry. This wasn't about you. This was me. And that connection through that repair is, I can't describe it. I mean, I can't get that anyplace else at that level of intimacy. And that to me has been the biggest, it's been life-changing for me.
Okay. So thank you, both of you, Sam and Jen. That was raw and true and lovely. And you're the case for having children. Oh my gosh, right? You're and we're better people because our children repaired us and changed us, and it's awesome. And yet I would say I definitely have a case for not having children. And that is so interesting because I feel like this is such a sensitive topic for me to broach it and say, well, at the same...
Let's go there.
At the same time, what did I protect human beings from not coming into this world from? That I know if I had them earlier on in my life, it would have been, I think, profoundly damaging. And I'm glad I didn't get pregnant and didn't have kids, so...
It's interesting because, Amanda, you said something last week when we were talking, about just finding your identity and not wanting your identity in kids. And I noticed for me, sort of afterwards, I thought, oh man, do I have my identity through my kids? And I think you have a point. I had to come face to face with that,
Yeah, I've seen a lot of people, and this is kind of what's brought me to my place of being stuck and do I want them or do I not, is I've seen too many good people with potential to be amazing parents fall into this place of finding their identity in their kids. And the repair that's done is not done in a healthy way. It's done in an unconsciously selfish way. For the parent to find healing, and oftentimes at the expense of the kid. And I am terrified that I will fall into that myself with my own kids. That I've done a lot of my own work in therapy, many, many years. But then even just getting my puppy, like all of a sudden I find when I'm sad, I go to my puppy and it's like, oh gosh, like if I had a human being, what kind of brokenness would I be putting on them that I'm not noticing, that I'm not recognizing? And furthermore, creating a life for them like I had, that things will just begin to repeat. And there won't be an awareness, because I think when you do have kids, life is so chaotic. I mean, things are fast moving and go, 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 and they're growing quick, and friends are in and out, and there's stuff happening in your relationship that those moments can come and happen and you miss them. And I just remember like thinking of my childhood and that happening so often with my parents, you know, and they did the best they could, but it was harmful. They did the best they could, but I still, you know, had a lot of brokenness come out of that. So
I think it's important. Gosh, well said, by the way, well articulated. But I think it's important that what we're discussing, or what the fear we're discussing of, is about something different than maybe just normal day people who've had really help, which are out there. We're psychotherapists, so we're seeing very
really they are out there.
You know, we're talking about being, you know, with people who've had very insecure attachments, grown up in bad childhoods with trauma. And so what we're saying is that there's the capacity for a parent to have a child and not know how to give them what they need, not know how to mirror them, not know how to know them. They have so many needs themselves that the child becomes hypersensitive, hyper alert, hyper aroused, forgets all their needs, represses all their needs, and instead mirrors the parent, and then loses their identity or finding out who their identity is. And it takes them then, as an adult, years of therapy to find out who they are. And then they question having kids themselves because they don't know that they want to do the same thing to their kids. I mean, I don't know if I've said that well enough, because it's coming from a really therapeutic point of view. Maybe you can even elaborate on this idea.
Well, I'm thinking, and I heard it with Amanda too. It's the parents who haven't, who've had tough childhoods or whatever, haven't had the room or the environment to figure themselves out, and who weren't taken care of. And now they have kids, and the kids end up taking care of them.
The parentified child.
Yeah. 100%. So once this child has taken care of their parents, like both of you have talked about, and that just means even just emotionally that the parent's sad, like what you just said, Amanda, and the parent goes to the child to get their bucket filled or whatever it is, then of course it's so understandable that child would grow up and say, hey, I've done my time. The last thing I want is more human beings that need me to be there for them. Yeah, that makes so much sense.
Well said. Yeah. So it's that parentified feeling. I think that then, and I wonder how many child-free couples, so maybe they're completely set of their own, but, that say they're selfish or say they're shallow, but really are just saying I was parentified and I don't want to keep working. Maybe I've done enough parenting.
Like from the outside to hear you talk about the titles of those books, or the words that people use to describe child-free couples, like selfish and shallow. Those are so mean. So unfair. And it's so unfair that we then get this, we're such generous martyrs. Like, oh, look at us parenting, doing the noble thing. Like, that's not true. Like, this can be remarkably more selfish than someone who's I'm not going to have kids. That feels like it's going to be I don't think I'm equipped for the job. It's so mean.
Well, and the child-free people that are really, if you look this up you Google it.
Oh, there's gnarly stuff out there.
It's so intense. Yeah. I mean, they'll call you breeders.
I know.
And
like that, actually.
You're horrible. I mean, but
I'm a serious breeder.
Serious. We're going to have to go to District 14.
I know.
Yeah.
But there is a sense of both sides just coming with just harsh accusations, instead of just seeing that there's so much, I think, ambiguity, ambivalence, and anxiety when it comes to parenting, and that we have to sit in that if we choose to be child-free or we choose to have children, that again, it's just tolerating that even if you are a parent, and that's what I think you Sam and Jen did such a great job of doing is that you said, there's ambivalence always.
Mm-hmm.
And that's always one of my favorite things when I used to teach human development or you look at any human development books, they talk about that story, or the song Rockabye Baby,
Mm-hmm.
right? On a treetop, when the wind blows, the cradle will fall, or how does it go?
When the wind blows, the cradle will rock.
Mm-hmm.
When the bell breaks, the cradle will fall and down will come baby, cradle and all.
Yeah, so I'm rocking my sweet child and loving my sweet baby while I'm imagining it die.
I'm imagining their
Death.
demise.
Mm-hmm.
And that is an experience of a parent.
Isn't that the experience of relationship, though? Can I just say, in general, it's not,
Yes.
Sorry, future husband of mine who's out there listening, proud of me, who's going to hate this moment. But there's that ambivalence, which I'm sure he feels too, of like, oh my gosh, I love this person. They bring a joy and a meaning and a depth to my life. And then something happens that brings this relational distress. And you're like, what would my life be like if you didn't exist?
Right.
I could be so free right now to watch whatever the hell I want.
But that's so different because you're choosing and I love that you brought this up. You're choosing that from a spouse.
Right.
And they're an adult.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
But when you have a baby and they are crying and they are needy and they have colic,
it's a different kind of
you don't get to
sacrifice.
say, you know what, I maybe I didn't want to sign up for this anymore. I'm done. This is it. You are. And so no one can go and say, I decided not to do the child thing after I had it.
Right.
No one can say, well, I got divorced. There's no divorce from child. This is it. This is my baby forever.
Well, I would say there is divorce from parenting, and that I see the effects of it all the time.
Okay. Yes. But we understand that that's abandonment, abuse, horrific. It just, the consequences, it's a dependent. So it's not the same as an adult and saying no to an adult.
Mm-hmm.
It's very different.
Yeah. Well, I think a lot of our society, I can only speak from growing up in like a Western society, but I don't think we have done a very good job of normalizing that ambivalence, of normalizing that you love your child and hate your child at the same time. I remember when I had my first baby and my friend called me. She's a child friend of mine. She was like, oh my gosh, how's it going? And speaking of colic, my son had food allergies that weren't diagnosed for the first 6 months. He had all sorts of stuff going on digestively, and he screamed and threw up for 6 months straight. And I remember saying, she said like, oh my gosh, how's it going? That's my honest answer. I remember where I was standing in my kitchen and I just said like, I hate it. It's awful. I wish I could do a do-over. Like, it's so bad. I don't know how human beings have recreated. There's got to be something wrong here, because if it was always like this, there'd be nobody left. Mm-hmm. Like, it was that bad. And I remember saying that, and I think I remember that conversation with such vividness because I felt so ashamed of saying that, but I was also sleep deprived and was literally being screamed at by this thing that I loved and thought, I'm going to be this great mom to this baby. And he was screaming at me every day, telling me how much I sucked in my own head. Like, you're getting it wrong. You're getting it wrong. You're not getting it right. And the pressure of that was just so overwhelming that I did wish, like, oh my gosh, like, annul this, like, cancel, do over. But that it's taken me years to realize, like, oh, that's normal. But I didn't think it was normal. And I felt like I was a horrible parent for feeling it. And so the stress just like it accumulated until, thank God I broke and went to see a therapist, and my son and I have a great relationship, but I worked it out. But like, that ambivalence, it wasn't until much later in my parenting life that I knew that, like, oh, that's what the lyrics to that song mean. Oh, that's what. And still, I don't know about you, Jen, but there are not a lot of moms that are like, oh yeah, me too. Mm-hmm. There's a lot of moms that are like, really? Well, my child sleeps 12 to 12. And, really, we did like this really great, or my child sleeps, 8 to 8, or, there's a lot of like, kind of one-upmanship and competition, and like, oh, really? You struggle there? I can refer a book to you. There's a lot of judgment. It's a harsh world sometimes. Mm-hmm. I don't know. Maybe that's just my experience.
No. I mean, I definitely agree that it is hard. It is interesting though, and I kind of even felt shame on the other side of it. That hasn't been my experience, and mine is for a totally different reason. And I think I was numb and dissociative most of my life before. And I remember having my daughter, who's my oldest, and the second I had her and they put her on me, I was crying and laughing and had emotional overload like I had never had in my entire life. Like like literally my emotions were going haywire, and I was beyond ecstatic. And I remember just looking at my husband and I said, let's do this again. And that has been my experience with them, you know, and of course mine is a total blur because I had 4 kids, ages 4 and under when I had my twins. So very different. And yes, definitely not perfect days of, you know, where they're all over the place and sick in the middle of the night. And there's just been something in me that even in the middle of the night when they're sick that I've thought, wow, I'm happy I get this time with them. And that's just the narrative that I have created as a parent, that even in those hard times, I just told myself, this is, you know, I'm glad I get this one-on-one time or something like that. Was it hard? Yes. Did I want to cry? Yes. Did I sometimes? Yes. But I think just that being in touch with my emotions on a level that I would have never had if I hadn't, at least I don't think I would have if I didn't have kids, was the gift in the, you know, in the beginning of it. So that I sort of held on to.
They like woke you up.
They woke me up. Yeah, definitely.
That's pretty profound.
So,
again, so, you know, we want to in some way globalize it, but it's so personal.
So personal.
And yet there is a sense, what you're talking about, Sam, that I hear constantly, which is the perfect mom. I mean, I know that like when Oprah was doing that for a while, it was this like craze of like, oh my gosh, we're allowed to say like, we're not always great moms. And that was just huge. Like, yes, I didn't bathe my child like yesterday. It was too hard. I just like put them in the jacuzzi and then like put on like, I remember someone saying that like some clothes and brought them to school and like, am I terrible? Am I like, you know, should I be like, you know, condemned? And it was like, no, it's really difficult. So, but I think that is so funny for me not having children. The confessions scared me more, right? Instead of the, oh my gosh, you're so great. You don't know, we're on the other side. You don't realize it's all perfect over here. But instead, no, everything you feared is totally true.
Times 10.
Times 10 and we're dying.
Right.
That's what I heard and all, like Oprah everywhere. And we're all just don't know what we're doing. And oh my God, while we're walking our strollers every day and you're going off to work, all we're thinking is they're so lucky they get to talk to human adults. I mean, that's what I kept hearing. And so then you're like, well, I guess I have made a really good decision. And, you know, so it's confusing.
It is confusing.
Oh, yeah, definitely.
And I'm not going to lie, like my friends that have chosen not to have children, I have several friends because I have a lot of friends with kind of mutual connections of childhood negative experiences and they haven't had children. And I have some strong opinions about why they haven't had children that are very laced with envy and resentment. My own envy.
Yeah, say more, please.
Like, well, I have a dear friend who's decided to not have children, and I secretly have this dark judgment of like, well, that's just because that's not really a choice. You're too afraid of being re-triggered. You're too afraid of really healing your childhood, so you don't want to go there. Podcast. No. You don't want to go there. So that's not an actual choice of whether or not you want to have children. That's just a aversion to remembering. So that's my take. But you know, I don't know. There's
I think it's a fair accusation. Doesn't mean it's accurate, but it's fair.
I think it's kind of the same on both sides. Yeah, you have children to meet needs that have been unmet, or you don't have children because you have unresolved issues. It's both very unresolved.
To meet needs you didn't have met.
Exactly.
Yeah, which is what I was saying about, like, it's so hard to untangle that, to really say, I made a really clear choice. Not based on my childhood, based on, like, my adult self. I made a really clear choice. I don't know if a human can...
There's probably a very small population who has either had kids or who have chosen not to, who have come to that place of, no, really, I'm not equipped to do this. It's not in my future children's best interest. So I've decided not to. And then those who are like, I really thought about this parenting thing. I've done a lot of repair and healing, and I'm going to go for it. I want to create a better life for some kids than I had for myself.
But even that statement isn't clear from I'm going to create a better life.
Yeah.
It's still laced with, like, I'm thinking about my childhood when I'm making that decision. So there's so much of, like, I don't know if as a human we're ever capable of getting to a place where we make that choice because you just don't know what you're in for. I mean, it's like the ultimate Russian roulette. You don't know what kind of kid you're gonna get. You don't know what the future's gonna hold. All you kind of do is just say, like, is it worth it? Is it worth the risk? Am I willing to maybe come face to face with the dirty truth about this decision in the future? And then will I be willing to reconcile that if I see it?
And that's a normal thing that I think most people did. You know, they were like, oh my gosh, I'm coming from a woman point of view, but every girl I know, oh my gosh, I love that man and I want to make a baby with him. I mean, that's kind of like, you know, the go-to. And of course it's all going to work out because I'm in this kind of great on a cloud place. And then you're right, you never know, but our love's going to take us all the way is the idea. And if it doesn't, oh, well, that's shocking. It's not let's look at this really practically and rationally and see if we should get married and then think about kids. That just wasn't on the table. That is a newer idea, I think, of, you know, the 2000s.
Seeing like procreation as a matter of
an option. Yeah.
I think it's great. I think it's great that people are looking at that as choice because I think it does create a different narrative for a child. Because I think that matters. You know, we all know that story of how we were conceived and how we were held in mind when our parents were, you know, preparing for us. And there is a different sense of our being in the world to know that we were chosen and created intentionally. You know, I think that's been something that's been joked around for generations and generations, and it's just been kind of one of those funny things, but it's a real pain. It matters how we were brought into the world. And
it is interesting, though, how much value is placed on both sides. When to me, I just see it as a choice, just like I might like Italian food more than Chinese food. You know, and Brenda, you might like Chinese food more. Like neither one of them is more right.
I don't know what to do with that. I have to metabolize that for a moment. That seems trite, but maybe it is that simple, but it seems heavier for me. It seems more ingrained in my soul for me. It seems like I struggled with it probably for 18 years before I decided not to. Back and forth. Even with my husband for a good 10 years, we talked about it back and forth. And so I don't struggle with Chinese food or Italian food that much, but with a child, it was huge and we struggled and there was ambivalence and so many people said, God, you'd be such good parents. And, we said we knew we would. And I think I mentioned this to you when we were having a discussion, Amanda, but that would mean that we might lose ourselves. That we would give so much to that child. I know I would, but that I'd be so scared of it going wrong that I might not be able to still be a person and take care of myself. That I would turn into the ultimate codependent. I do fear that. I did fear that. And, maybe that's just a fear, but it's a real one. That I would go the opposite way.
I guess what I'm thinking of, and I hear you, I hear how it's been such a huge, you know, and difficult decision either way. I guess for me, I see it where that difficulty comes from the value to me that's placed on it. More than the freedom of choice of it, because I think there is still a value that goes, this is good or this is bad.
Say more.
Well, I just feel like even just from society, it's like there's something that's put on it. Like we said, you know, this is just what you do. You get married, you have kids, and there's this value of if you do this, then everything's good. It's like a good thing. So you had to go against that, which created difficulty in the decision. And more than obviously it's not, someone doesn't say it's good to have Chinese food or it's bad or whatever, but I feel like it comes down ultimately to choice, and both choices are it's the same. There's no good or bad for each one. I mean, I don't know how else to explain it. Sorry.
No, I'm hearing you. So you're saying I'm rebellious, that really all of this is more of a rebellious decision.
I think what becomes so difficult is what the value is placed on having kids or not having kids.
So I'm rebelling against the value of it being a good thing that I've decided to
Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I think that you've had to fight, not, thinking like I'm going to be rebellious, but I think fighting against the norm then feels like it's a huge decision because it's so, because you're going against what people, what people are thinking of, or what you're hearing and what most people do.
Okay, so I think I get you, but I'm not sure I do.
Yeah.
But I know that I lived across the street from this older couple, and they were. We went to a trivia night at a pub across the way at an Irish bar, and it was fun.
I can't do that. I have children.
Exactly.
Case in point.
That sounds nice, Brenda. Tell me about that. Just kidding.
All right. So, and they said, we asked them, do you have children? Because they were older. And, I think like in their, probably almost 60, both of them. And they smiled and said, we're the kids.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm. I don't know if that's what you're trying to say, is that they decided to find value in that. And I thought that was such a profound thing. And then I said, oh, I like that idea. Like we're the kids, because I think my husband and I were so parentified in our lives. And that's what you're talking about, Amanda, being parentified is just that we decided to be the kids, that we get to like live for a while and not have to say, okay, so I lived my whole life kind of worrying about the parent, then trying to like survive because I didn't get parental resources, figuring out how to be an adult. And now that I just arrived, let me have children and make it all about them again, and never really get this opportunity or this time to, I don't know, take a deep breath and enjoy a little bit of it. But maybe no one does that. Maybe I'm thinking of a different path for being a woman, which is that you do get to stop and take some time for you, and you don't have to have kids. Maybe that is a very new evolutionary choice.
I think that's what I hear you saying. I don't know if that's accurate. That like my like kind of dumbed down version of what you're saying is that it's a bummer that that this decision is so charged. That, why can't it just be Italian food or French food?
Yeah.
Or
Yeah.
Chinese food? Like, it's a bummer.
Why can't it be?
That there has to be such agonizing over, I don't want to have kids.
Yeah.
I don't have kids. Like, great.
Yeah.
Pick up sticks tonight. Awesome. Like,
Yeah.
it's a shame that it's not a neutral decision. It's a shame that there has to be such agonizing over what will that mean about me?
Yeah.
And, rather than like, oh, there are a million ways to invest your maternal instinct. There's a million ways. Like if birthing a kid doesn't feel good, great.
Absolutely.
But I think there is this kind of unspoken weight to one or the other.
Because I know I'm giving up something amazing. I do. I know that my body can create like a miracle in it. And that I know that that's something that's so incredible to watch.
It's like the potential of your body that you'll never activate.
Yes, I know that.
It's like a superpower.
Yeah.
Right. Totally. Yeah.
Totally.
Oh, yeah.
Are you kidding? I watch people go through that.
Yeah.
I know I am actively saying no to that. I'm not saying, I'm not a person that's saying that couldn't happen to me. I know that I am saying my body can do this miraculous thing.
Yeah.
And I choose not to let it.
And that's where the charge comes from.
And that is hugely charged. It's powerful. That's not Chinese or Italian food. That is me saying, I do see that. That is.
But do you think that there's another way to metaphorically get that same experience? I know physically you can't, but okay, so I've had a baby, and I remember having my baby, and I remember afterwards, this just popped into my head when you said that. I remember like someone was like, "How are you?" And I was like, "I'm you might need to bleep this. I'm a fucking woman now." I was like, "Yes." Like,
I've heard that before.
Like, oh my! Like,
I could do anything. That's what I felt like.
Superwoman.
Confidence in myself of what my body had just done for me.
Yes. Powerful.
Just like blew my mind. Right. But Brenda, you're a woman that I admire to the deepest sense that I think a woman can admire another woman. And I feel like you have birthed more babies than I could ever birth. And so I wonder if there's like a metaphorical way that you can have that same experience, that even if you don't feel it in your vagina. You still feel it in your soul. And I don't know if it's about having children or not having children. You know?
Yes,
so to hear you say that really struck me, because I just wanted to be like, oh no, Brenda, you are the mother of 1,000
of all
children
mothers
that I like worship and admire. That my 2 human babies are they're a drop in that pool. So
yeah, I totally agree.
Yeah, that brings me to tears, obviously. And no, I completely agree. And I've used psychotherapy often as being a metaphor for midwifery. But I don't think I'm having the baby. I do think I help other people have babies.
Yeah.
I think I'm really good at that.
So maybe there's grief either way then, right? There's the grief of what we lose when we have a baby and the things that you give up. You give up that we're the child thing, you know, like my fiance and I are getting ready to buy a house. And the other day we had this honest conversation where the kids were like, oh my gosh, we're going to have this. And he and I jokingly said like, well, we're like 12. So when are the grownups coming to take care of all this? You know, and we have to grieve that in order for this to go well, we got to do some growing up. We don't get to be just 12 anymore. So there's grief there too. It's not the same. You know, there's grief either way.
There is. And I mean, I did the 5 years with group home kids and foster care kids and these just amazingly angry, beautiful children that I worked with when I was doing my internship for psychotherapy. And I told my husband at the time, if I wasn't working with them, I probably would be begging you to have a child. But because I was going in 10 hours a day and these adorably angry 9-year-old to 14-year-olds needed me, there was so much maternal care I was constantly giving out. So I feel though more like a midwife than I feel like a mother with my clients, that I'm helping them birth something new. But maybe I'm off on that. Maybe because there is a part of you holding that space, containing that space that is very maternal and very reparenting.
Oh, yeah. I mean, I definitely think so. What you do in the office with attunement, which is so crucial as a mom, with the child or client, internalizing the primary caregiver, the mother figure, the therapist. I mean, there's a lot of similarities.
And my therapist has been such a good mom to me.
Yeah, mine too.
So as we're thinking about this, I think that what we keep coming back to, though, is that either decision is to have children or not have children is very personal and will result in incredible gains and incredible losses.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been thinking about it, and it's almost like I've been really trying to self-reflect and think like, am I coming from a place having experienced childbirth? Do I have like a quote unquote, I don't want to use the word privilege because it implies better than, but it's like, I've had that experience. And so therefore I can say, oh no, it's the same. You're just as maternal as a therapist or as a caring human being, or there are ways to be a mother that are just the same, that I'm not honoring because I don't know what it would be like to be a therapist and not be a mother. I haven't had that experience. So I think it's tricky. I want to honor both, that I don't know what it's like to be a therapist and to have those maternal instincts that I put into practice and do in the world. And I become kind of a mother, quote unquote. I just saw Wonder Woman. So it's a little bit like she's a wonderful mother in a lot of ways, right? So, but she doesn't have children. I mean, she was sculpted from clay. I don't know if Wonder Woman could have children. That'd be an interesting topic, but, she has this beautiful maternal power. But there is something about the human experience that is different. And I think I would be wrong if I said like, oh no, for some reason I feel the need to be like, oh, it's the same. You can be just as maternal and just as, like there's nothing missing if you don't have children. But I think in those moments I'm missing something because the only experience I know is having the two to compare personally.
Yes, but
Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I think the Mother Teresa example was powerful, and she's called a mother, and the idea that she has parented so many and used her maternal instincts in that way. I mean, did she feel, we still don't know, did she feel like she wished she had her own biological children?
Mm-hmm.
You never know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. But I think that there is something powerful that a woman can use her body to create. And that is always going to be, for me, a knowing loss that I've chosen not to enter into.
Can I ask a question?
Yeah.
Is it a loss because a part of you will never know the physical experience of that? Like, what's the loss for you? Or is it a loss of like what the mothering experience after that would be like? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. I think just the fact of using my body in that way.
Like it has a capacity that you won't ever tap into.
Yes.
Okay.
That, of course that I won't ever, meet the person my husband and I could create. That's gone on, but it's also been a choice that I don't want to. But the also that I will never know what the feeling of being pregnant and giving birth. That to me is powerful. And I think, Jen,
that's real.
You had said something about that experience, before. We've talked about it, that it feels like real powerful for you.
Yeah. Yeah, definitely for me. And something that I've held on to. It feels like the only time that God is that I'm with him creating something together. So that he, is used my body in that way that, it's creating a human being. It's so remarkable to me when you think about where they start from and how they grow, and you have this child, and then you're helping to keep this child alive while nursing them. And, it's crazy everything that you're making with your body to sustain them, until they start eating some food it's pretty remarkable for me. It was.
But at the same time, it's so important that we just acknowledge too that there's the remarkableness, but there's also, and I think we mentioned that before when we were talking, this idea of the prevailing idea is, as a woman, I am made to procreate. So that I would go against that is very powerful because I'm not, if we really break it down, I'm not meant for much more than that. If we go real patriarchal and go centuries back, and then even in the 50s, or even, today still in many places, it's like, be at home, have a baby. That's what you're made for. And so to go against that is going against, I think, just, a gale wind of prevailing thought in the world.
Yeah, that's where, and I, thought about what I said about, and didn't want to reduce it down to just picking a restaurant. But that's where I look at the value system. And it's kind of like, who is to say that is all a woman is good for? Who set up that value system that even having attributes of a mother is what we are trying to attain?
Right. Biology.
Well, I just think there's so many ways those same, I don't know. I guess what I hear it is like, this is what you're trying to go towards, like Mother Teresa, and using that example. Obviously, she was amazing, but you can look at the qualities of her just as a caring person and take out the motherhood of it, quote unquote.
Like the female gender part of it?
Yeah.
Is that what you mean? Well, because a man could be just as maternal. As you were saying,
yes.
Like my therapist has been
yes.
like my new mother. And I thought, absolutely. And then I thought about, I have an amazing couples therapist with my fiance, and he's been the father I've never had. Mm-hmm. And there's been like nurturing and healing and encouragement in that room that is equally as parental, I think.
Yeah.
It looks different because he's a different person, but I guess it's that funky gender line that's hard to get.
Mm-hmm.
through. And I think you're right. I think men are not considered quite, the consideration is definitely more heavily weighted with women than this is with men. Like a man can go his whole life and not have children. And it's kind of like, oh, okay. Like George Clooney, right? Like no big deal, right? But then, a woman does the same thing and it's like, ooh, it's a very different kind of spin.
Yeah. And that's where I think, because I think the value system, because of what society has set up.
Not only that, but as we've had this conversation, you guys have heard my questioning on having my own kids and listening to everybody's input. I think about, it's not just the gender difference, but as a woman, it's what I'm realizing is the word vulnerability comes to mind. It's the ultimate level of vulnerability is to become a mother, physically, spiritually, emotionally. Your full entire being becomes so engulfed in vulnerability in that process. And so I think as I'm thinking about it, this resistance to a woman not wanting to become a mother is resistance to your I don't want to say your full potential, because it's not that. It's your acceptance of full vulnerability and nakedness, essentially being stripped down and naked and vulnerable. And I think that comes into play, and that's also where that difference lies with men and women. Is men can't reach that level, and it doesn't change my mind quite yet on what I want to do and what direction I want to take. But I'm thinking, as we're talking about it, like I feel vulnerable even talking about it. There's this angst that comes up in me thinking about being a mother, and I talk about not wanting to ruin my kids and hurt them, in the ways that I was hurt and the traumas I went through. But it goes back to being vulnerable to my messiness and being vulnerable to another person in that creation of life in my body.
Yeah, actually that I can 100% see, because there's nothing that changed me more than the moment that I had my daughter. And I remember it so clearly, one, having her, and I don't know, maybe I talked about this earlier, but just feeling all of it. Like having, my body was so overcome with emotion that I had never felt before, that I was laughing and crying at the same time. And basically it was like, let's do it again, because I became so in touch with my feelings. But then this sense of responsibility as they laid her on me, which I have not shaken. And that's what I wake up with. That's what I go to bed with, is this sense of responsibility for these other human beings.
It's terrifying.
That I love more than anybody.
Yeah.
More than anybody, more than myself, more than anybody. I love these people.
So I'm going to look, I disagree a bit, but I hear you. And I think it's some profound, thoughts about it. And I was really searching my heart as you're saying that. Am I resistant to the vulnerability? Is that the issue? And I kept thinking about it. I thought, maybe. But I was quite vulnerable as a child for many years, and felt so that I had to repress all that vulnerability and instead be responsible for my parent. And so I feel almost the opposite, that the responsibility is so large that I decided to give myself permission to be more vulnerable in my life. That I get to be free and have my needs met for a while and my thoughts, and not just push them down again. Because I know, I really feel like I would do that because I want to be the best mother in the world.
Right.
And it would be so hard for me to say, I get to have myself and my child. I just feel like there's such a pull even in the idea of it, that I would just say, nope, no vulnerability. You don't get to have all that. You just got to make it about the child. Maybe when they leave the nest, then it would just be a prolonged drama. And that I've chosen to say, I can enjoy vulnerability and some freedom in my life now. And that feels so vulnerable to me and powerful and different than just parenting. So for me, it's a different piece. Now the childbirth, that's why I say the act itself, I think would be so vulnerable. And I even watch the way that I feel around pregnant women, and my husband does. Like you see someone pregnant and you're like, protect her. Is she getting, I was at the spa the other day, and someone went into this like sauna, not a sauna, but like this little area that was a little hot. And I thought, oh, we need to get her some water, and I felt this protection for her that she's going to get too hot. So that piece, not the responsibility afterwards, but that piece, you're right. I don't think that I'll get to have that vulnerability, but that's a short part of being a parent.
Absolutely.
That's a small, 10-month time period. And then here's the responsibility. And I mean, that's my thoughts or whatever coming back.
You know, I think I hear both. It's so funny because I can hear both of yours, because I'm definitely not vulnerable as a parent for myself. I don't have time to go home and get into my feelings and stuff. I don't. I need to, when I'm done with therapy, in my own personal therapy, I need to shut it down because I got to go home and be mom. Yes. And I don't want them taking care of me, and I don't want any of that.
And I know how to do that well.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. That's what you don't want your kids to do. So, so I have to manage myself very tightly and don't have a lot of space to do that. But I see the vulnerable side. It's the vulnerable side of loving something so much that I do fear something happening to them. Yes. I fear, like, that's what feels so, and you're so out of control of any of that. And that's the vulnerability piece for me as a mom.
I have an interesting, I'm going to just give a disclaimer right here that I might listen to this podcast in 5 years and shudder at the sound of my own voice, because I probably have a lot to grow on here. Yeah. But I'm thinking any animosity, I guess I can only speak for myself, but I kind of feel like this might be more global than just me. Any animosity I have towards anyone who doesn't want a child is my pure resentment of exactly what you said, Brenda, that you get that. And I made the choice that requires the sacrifice of that. And there are parts of my life and parts of my day that are like, fuck. Like, I think about you, pardon my language. I think about you sometimes when you're working a long day and we go home, and I get bitter. And I'm like, yeah, but she doesn't have kids to go home. She wanted me to start writing this paper. She doesn't get it. Like, that's my honest answer. Yeah. And I'm like, she doesn't get, she doesn't. And then I think, and then you're talking about the vulnerability, the vulnerability of childbirth. I didn't feel that. To me, it was like a really bad period. Childbirth was a really bad period with hemorrhoids. Like, it was not magical for me.
I've heard so many friends tell me that, by the way.
The experience afterwards was I just did something really gnarly, but I also had the same experience when I ran a marathon. Yeah. I could do that. Holy crap, my body is capable of that. To me, they're equal.
I was thinking the same thing when you talked about using your body for something amazing and the potential. And I'm thinking, how much more? I'm an athlete. Right. And I gave that up, in a sense. You don't have to as a mom. So there's plenty of moms that still do that things, but having 4 kids pretty quickly, my body's not quite the same, especially having twins. And the potential of what I could have been or could have done with my body in different ways.
So it's there on either side in a way. I think about what you say, the potential of how much healthier of a woman I could be, how much more healing I could do, how much better I could be in my intimate love relationship if I had not taken on the role of parenting. And I swear at my most honest core, I took on the role of parenting because I didn't know what else to do in life. And I thought, well, you have a baby, right? And then afterwards, I thought, what the hell have I done? This is huge. And then it's been years and years of grieving that I did not know myself and was emotionally cut off when I made this decision. And so I know there will be a million other women who probably hear this and shudder and go, oh my God, because what I'm saying is probably sacrilegious. But, I had a mother who was like, oh, growing you in my womb was the most tender thing. And I think it was all bullshit, to be totally honest. I think it was a lot of projection. And I doubt that she really felt much of it, but felt what she thought she should feel. And it was really like a gnarly period. I felt really strong and powerful afterwards. I felt the same feeling after I ran my half marathon. Or maybe that was even more intense for me because I had done a lot of therapy and wasn't as emotionally cut off as I was. Having my children gave me a boost of extreme confidence that I could survive that which I thought was not survivable. And that experience, I think, can be had in other ways. But I know that there's no way to touch an experience you've never had. So there's longing and grief on either side. To be able to practice and have 25 clients and then go home and just have my husband and I mean, it could make me weep, to be honest, to think what I would be capable of in intimacy. But instead I repress because I've got to be a mom. And then all my childhood floods in, and then he becomes dad, and then it all gets fucked up. And I can't get close for too long because it got too extreme. And then I think, oh my God,
good. So I don't know. I don't want to minimize and say it's the same on either side, but I feel like there's so much like,
it's experience too.
It's experience.
You can go on both sides.
Yeah.
Because I'm getting ready to empty nest and I am terrified. I'm like, to go home to an empty house feels so awful to me, quite honestly.
And I envy it.
I mean, I love the noise. I love the hugs. I can sit there this morning doing my puzzle and my son comes over and just kisses me on the top of the head.
And you know what mine is for me, the pain of walking in and they don't want to hug me is so extreme that I long for a house where that's not even an issue anymore.
Oh, yeah.
Because there are days he doesn't want to hug me. He doesn't want to get close. And to me, the pain of that is like, why did I choose this? Why didn't I give myself what Brenda gave herself?
Yeah.
Which was a fucking opportunity to just have it be about me and to grieve all the pain I'd already had. But instead, I took on another dose.
Yeah.
And
that's the vulnerability.
I deeply regret that. I deeply do. So I also know that I chose to have children not because I wanted to lean into vulnerability, but because I couldn't do the opposite. To be really vulnerable at that point, I would have left my marriage and I would have been alone and I would have gone and been a dancer and I would have really been courageous. For me, having children was hiding. Yeah.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so profound and so moving and touching. And I'm speechless for a moment. I just want to honor what you said.
I think that's the most honest I've ever been about mothering.
Yeah, and it's so important to share this because I know so many people that they do find their, and again, their identity through motherhood, or they say, I don't know what else to do, so I'll have kids. And then there's a way they're supposed to be. And they don't ever get to say what you just said because that would be so, like you said, people would shudder or this and that, and they don't get to be honest. And so for you to do that, and that's a gift. And your gift of vulnerability, though, I watch, sometimes daily. It is quite powerful. And your kids, I think, are blessed to have a mother who has the ability to do that.
Thank you. I hope so.
But there's without a doubt.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
So we really come to the place that we, I think, realize that, again, everybody's experience is so personal, but there's no way that each experience, I think, that we've articulated does have there's such difference in it all. And so that's got to resonate with different listeners. So I'm really proud of this episode.
I honestly believe it would change the world if women felt they had the permission to be more honest about all of these things.
Yeah.
We would powerfully change the world.
Yeah. So any final thoughts from anyone as we finish up here? All right. Well,
poignant silence.
What I think I'd love to finish up with, or at least hope that is that other people will feel that's betrayed, is that other people will feel permission to be vulnerable, permission to be authentic, permission to have these kind of painful and scary conversations, and then permission to really look and go there and with regards to what it means if they have a child or if they don't. That it's not something like simply, you're selfish and shallow and you're getting to lay on a beach, or that it's, that you are the most wonderful woman, or a terrible breeder, right?
Yeah. It's so much more complex than that. It's just another way to split it all, isn't it?
Yes.
It's another way to split it into good and bad, or right and wrong. Yeah. But my kids will say now in the back of the car, wow, that's complex. I will say yes.
Yes. So let's try to withdraw those projections and not get our identity from either side, but just, again, holding that ambiguity and that ambivalence of all human experiences, because that's really what it's about.
Amen.
Thank you for choosing to listen to the Don't Go There podcast. If you enjoyed our podcast, please review us on iTunes. To learn more about any of us, go to www.don'tgotherepodcast.com or www.gazellepsychotherapy.com. Thanks again.